Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Dr. Joe Webb.
I say, hey, I'll be gone today, but I'll be back from around the way. Seems like everywhere I go, the more I see, the less I know. But I know.
Guy didn't want me to come out because he saw my first 6 slides. Oh, come on. I love my group over here from what they think. Thank you. All right, here's our agenda today. First, the beginning of the presentation, I'm going to scare the heck out of everybody. And then somewhere in the middle of the presentation, I'll be absolutely riveting and informative. There's something wrong with this group already. You're in Las Vegas. I mean, come on, be happy. After you see this presentation, you're going to want this presentation to stay here, right? What happens in Vegas stays here. What gets presented by Dr. Joe in Vegas stays here, I guess. And then I'll just tell everyone how smart they are as I ingratiate myself to the audience. So those will be our first, that's our plan for today. See, here's the first slide. What is this telling us? Well, this is inflation-adjusted printing shipments since 1995. That's the red line. That's down almost 50%. During that period, profits, industry profits went down 80%. We went from shipments in today's value of somewhere around $150 billion. Today we're going to be around 76 billion. Profits fell all the way from 18 down to $3 billion. There's a story behind this that's going to be coming up that is very, very interesting about reshaping our industry. What happened with commercial printing consumption on a per-person basis in the US? Well, that's dropped by more than half. It peaked around 1995, actually. Here we have 1997 marked out for you. It's about half of what it was. There's been a real big change in the nature of print. Some of you may have heard that. During that period, real GDP in the US went up by 71%. That's a big change. This is just commercial printing. Now, for you folks in packaging, that's a good industry because you have 2 things working for you. First one is population growth. The second one is the longevity or the age of the population at their death. That's been going up until very recently. It's just contracted just a little bit. You've got a floor underneath your market. The general commercial printing market does not have a floor underneath it. So more interesting things can happen in both directions there. So on the population side, the packaging folks see that floor because population grew by 23% during that particular time. GDP, we used to be an industry that represented 1.1% of GDP. Now we represent 0.33. That's a big difference. And what's the big thing behind that? Well, some of you may have heard of digital media. Raise your hand if you've heard of digital media. How many of you are on the internet right now saying what a rotten speech this is? Go ahead. You're tweeting that, right? Okay. So I inverted the right-hand axis there. That's called the z-axis for those of you in Excel land, because that is the average internet speed in the US. This is not the internet speed that you can buy, but this is the average of everybody. And I wanted to show it because if you look at the image this way, internet speed is one of the things that's pushing down on commercial printing shipments. Because as the speed goes up, more and more content gets created for online use. That content gets richer. That content gets more interesting, and you can view it on many, many more different devices. This has been known for quite some time. In the early 2000s, I used to analyze the number of hours that adult Americans were spending on broadband. I won't make any comments about what they're doing, but they were on broadband, and that had a better correlation to predicting print volume than GDP did. So our activities in digital media have a strong correlation to what we do in hard printing on paper. These next 2 slides show something that's driving that, and that is the prices of computing equipment and the prices of wireless. Since 2009, which 2009 was the beginning of the recovery, which was not very strong as we know, but since that time, printing shipments were down 28%. And it just so happens computer prices were down 28%. And the price of connectivity, wireless prices were down almost as much. All of these play a role because the more and more those prices come down, the more and more dependent people become on those kinds of media. This is, in some ways, an even more disturbing slide than that. You have printing prices. The prices that commercial printers charge in the marketplace during that period is only up 4%. During that time, consumer prices, the prices you and I pay in the store, are up 17%. I think that's somewhere around a 13% gap. Is my math right? Why are you shaking your head no? And the Postal Service prices are up more than 20%. But wait a second. The Postal Service says that their prices won't go up more than inflation. They only say that for first-class mail. They'll do it for everything else, and they have. And one of the more interesting things about this is that they can keep raising their prices, assuming some kind of impunity against laws of supply and demand. But that's the kind of thing that they do. Been some, you may have seen some articles recently about the use of printed goods or mailed goods by millennials. Well, if you go to the last page of that report from the Postal Service, you see a certain sleight of hand that they have there, which says, we did not use standard breakdowns of demographics for our analysis. So I was born in 1956. I am a late boomer. They classified me in their report as Generation X. Yes. Now, if you're in Generation X and you look like this, wouldn't you be worried? So they do this little sleight of hand to show how important they are, but they keep raising the prices, and the costs of distribution of hard copy print keep going up. So how do people deal with those kinds of things? Well, if you're a communicator, if you want to use print, you do lots and lots of things. You're going to see this slide again later. But you change your quantities, you change your frequencies, you change your page counts, you change your page size, you change your print process, you change the way you target. I'll stop there just for a second. Postal Service raises their prices without regard to what's happening in the marketplace. They don't see them competing against wireless prices or computer prices or anything like that because they're the Postal Service. There's no way that they can see that because they're allowed to. So what do? Communicators spend more time on data management. They spend more time on cleaning their lists. They spend more time creating their own lists. They spend more time analyzing those lists. And what happens with that? They can better target to digital media, rats. We lost that one. But it also means that they can mail less, and they can mail less often, but they can mail better. So luckily, the marketplace responds to the things that the Postal Service does to this market in many ways by the kind of ways that we treat our data management and the interesting things that we are now allowed to do in that way. We can change the substrates. We can change the content nature. We can change our distribution method. We can change the way we integrate with media. Now, I really like the Postal Service's approach. They'll give you a big 5% discount if you do certain things with digital media on your piece. So instead of holding our head underwater by 2 feet, they'll raise it to like 1.5 feet. That's funny. They're drowning us 2 feet, and then we're still underwater. Get it? Right? So it's like saying, here's a gallon of water, we're going to take a teaspoon back. It's not really very helpful for all that. And then we can change our suppliers and we can change our channels. So we have lots of alternatives as communicators. The marketplace has changed. And some of you who like cartoons and wish you were still in your room watching cartoons, we have some nice slides for you. Ready? There was a time when there was a mainstream printing business that was really, really big. And you could take ships to work in that business to deliver all the things that you produce to the marketplace at very, very great efficiency. You could do magazines, you could do catalogs, you could do newspapers inserts. You could do really, really long-run direct mail in the millions and millions of pieces. And all that was good. You could have little companies in there kind of nipping at the edges, but you could drive these or pilot these big ships all the way down into the mainstream printing business. And then the water level gets low. What happens? You start to see things that were on the bottom of that river or bottom of that stream. Not all the ships are able to get through. Navigation becomes more difficult. You have to worry about what's on the bottom. Some islands may actually pop up. You may get stranded on them, but some people can survive. Some people who have smaller ships can easily get through that. Then what happens? It gets lower. And now you have to be very careful about the kinds of opportunities that you look for, because they're not always obvious the way they were last time, because there was a time when everybody needed print, and it was easy to sell in that marketplace. But when people do not need print, that means that you have to change your sales approach, the benefits that you have. You have to have more knowledge of the customers. It used to be, I don't want to make it sound like it wasn't hard to be in the printing industry before, but we all know the stories of many printers in town. What kind of press should I buy? What does this shop have? What does that shop have? They seem to be doing good. I'll buy one of those. And that worked for a long time because it minimized the risk of making a bad equipment decision. We don't have that now because the marketplace has changed. Very often, a printer, a commercial printer, is going to be the only one in town or only one in a geographic area who has certain kinds of equipment capabilities. So they're looking for these opportunities. You go underwater to do it. You build new devices to do that. And then you have to change, when the water goes down even more, you change to other kinds of equipment. Now, why someone would have a suit and a tie riding one of those buggies, I have no idea. Maybe they're selling to the legal market, what can I say? But when the terrain changes, you have to bring new devices and new ways of looking at the industry there. So you need to know the mind of the marketplace. When the mind of the marketplace was, we had few alternatives and print was one of the key ones, that was easy. But what is it now? What are the decisions that communicators are making based on the availability that they have of digital media and even doing things like this, running events? Events have become a much more important part of the marketing mix. How many of you have heard of content marketing? Raise your hands. I always worry about not 100% of the hands go up in any of the speeches that I do. In that it's a really important thing to learn, because content marketing is not really anything new. We were doing lots and lots of those things before, but it gave us a name for those things, and it gave us a strategy for those kinds of things. So when you hear communicators talk about content marketing, it relies on the ability of someone seeking information to find information about what you do and what your company does, any place, any time, any format, any device, anywhere at their convenience. And print is just one of those particular things. Now, I worry about this because one of the things that I do is I'm active. I live in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, and I'm active in one of the marketing association chapters there. And every month we have a lunch, which is attended by somewhere between 125 to 200 people, all involved in marketing, advertising, public relations, graphic design. So I occasionally visit the only other printer who goes there. Say, hi, why do you come? Well, you know, I want to be involved in the industry. Well, I said, what happened to the other printers who used to come? Oh, they only come once. How come? Because they couldn't get a proposal out of going to the lunch. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, this is something wrong, because we just attended a panel discussion of 4 chief marketing officers, one from nonprofits, one from a startup, one from a university, and one from an established company. And they were spilling their guts to us about how they look at communications and the things that they do, and also talking about the problems that they have. And the printers don't want to go to that? No. The food is good, but they don't want to come. The food is good. And I realized something else was going on. The generational difference between the attendees and a lot of the people I meet in the printing industry. As you can imagine, being 50, I'm going to be 62 sometime this year. So I'm usually the oldest person who goes to these events. Most of the people are in middle management. Many of them are entrepreneurs in their own graphic design and public relations businesses and other businesses. So I start asking questions about print and what they do and all that, and I realized there's a context to the way they understand print that many people in the printing industry do not grasp yet. So let's put it this way. If you're 35 or younger and you're making decisions about communications, one of the ways you make decisions is based on your experience. Good. We did that all our business lives. The first thing is you've never worked in an economic boom. So if you're around 35, your first job, your first full-time job, when you track it back, means you were born sometime after 1982. You've been in a very soft economy all that time where the average GDP growth during all that period was like 1.8%, which was almost half of what it was post-World War II average. So you're looking at a totally different economy. What does that mean? Every company you've worked for was virtually on an austerity budget, except for a handful of companies in the economy. So everybody was trying to look for ways to cut costs. Everyone was trying to look for new ways to reach their marketplace that differentiated them from their competitors. Well, wait a second. Print is supposed to do that because people read prints more slowly than digital media. They absorb it better. They remember they remember what they're doing. It presents the information in a proper context and all that. So we're being told all these things about how good print is in this kind of environment, yet shipments keep going down. So what do we have to believe? Well, we have to believe, supposedly, that all the people who are making these communications decisions are stupid because they're risking their jobs every single day. All the data that they collect that leads them to make these decisions make absolutely no sense. So therefore, they keep making stupid decisions, yet somehow they keep their job, and the printers suffer for it. No, that's not exactly what's going on. Also, this group, to them, computers are a home appliance. It's always been there. It's always been there, and it's always had a combination of schoolwork, perhaps some business work, and some family use, and just plain old fun. A camera is a phone app. Google, some of you may have heard of this company. It's a verb, right? Even if we use Bing, because of course Bing means what? You don't know this? Because it's not Google. Why else would you name? And Siri is your concierge. Siri's sometimes the nicest person in our day. And print is always something you try to stop. So I'm sitting with an associate creative director at a digital agency in Raleigh, and I asked him, I told him what I did, and he said, that's really interesting. I always wanted to be involved in print, but print is intimidating. I said, wow, print is intimidating. And I'm such a nice, pleasant man. How could print be intimidating? We're all nice people. Raise your hand if you're not a nice person. Oh, there's a few of you. How could print be intimidating? You've been doing it in Word or whatever at home. You're doing print and make flyers for various things at school. How the heck can print be intimidating? So as you can imagine, this led to a couple of different discussions with him even after that lunch. And these were the things I learned, and I verified this with other people in the same age group, which is kind of mid to late 30s, in decision-making positions in agencies and other areas. First thing was the fear of the lockdown. Because if you're going to print, it's got to be really, really final. And when people keep putting proofs in front of you, that scares the crap out of you. Because you mean it's really got to be finished? It really has to be final? That's it? We can't change it once we deploy it? We can't fix it once we find something new? There's a failure penalty to it because all the money's up front, so if it doesn't work, you're out all that money. It's hard to measure. Yes, we have industries like the direct marketing industry and the catalog industry who created lots and lots of really interesting measures of the effectiveness of print, but it wasn't real time. It was occurred much, much later when things happened. So they found it hard to measure because the period of time between deployment and the actual time that you got the data was so far out. There was no opportunity for aha, meaning that they often had the experience of deploying some kind of digital media campaign and seeing something in the analytics that says, we need to change that because we can target this area harder and better by making a little change in our campaign. And they're doing that within matters of hours of seeing the initial response to that, as opposed to waiting days and weeks and perhaps months before some kind of print campaign may show that to them. The other thing was really surprising. They're scared of how much to order. This worries them because you're also committing to a price for something based on the ordering. And they really don't know. We used to know. We used to have a lot of experience. Oh yeah, we go through a certain number of brochures every year. Let's order, whatever that number is. But because they have little experience in print, they also don't know how to order it. They don't know how many to order. And having a safety stock is something that we used to do for clients to get them, first of all, to order more. But the incremental cost of that safety stock that they have, the overruns that we used to do, used to be really small in comparison to the larger job because print has an economies of scale to it, or traditional print has it. Safety stock is considered to be a failure. You had too much left over, you didn't use it all, what's wrong with you? Because they didn't know exactly what to order. And then the other problem is social. Social at work and social in other places. They don't know people who are also involved in creating and ordering print the way they used to. People have some experience in creating the files, but not through the process of analyzing how much they need or what they need to do with it. So, is digital media intimidating? Don't put me in front of a video screen and try to edit that. I can't do that. That's intimidating. This was easy for them. They've been using their tools since they were small. And the sense of intimidation disappears when you could measure the effectiveness almost immediately. I've had them say within hours they're judging whether or not certain campaigns are successful. They can also test without risk. This group knows more about what motivates their audience than anybody else does because they're watching it real time. They're often surprised, but there's no risk to them doing an A/B test. Very often they say A is the one that's going to work, B is the one that tests better, so they run with B. They know this in matters of days. They don't have to make major commitments to changes in graphics and changes in content in order to do that. It's very easy for them to do that in digital media. The tools for this are everywhere. Some of them are shown here at Connect. They're everywhere. Some of them are open source. They're inexpensive. Some of them are makeshift by people who just say, oh, gee, we wish we had something like that. So the tools are easier to find. You also get the inbound effects of doing digital media. Now, if you're not familiar with the book, Inbound Marketing came out about 10 years ago, written by the founders of HubSpot, a marketing automation software business. But this is the effect of search engines, mainly, of people just looking for information about businesses or problems that they have and seeing what they find. And then you want to be involved with search engine optimization and your content marketing strategy so that people can find the information that they want. This means that you don't have to have a priori, that's Latin, information, in case you were wondering, information about the audience that you're going to because they find you if you do your job on the internet, in search engines and the like. And they can also follow and adapt. They can track things that they're doing and keep adapting it to make it better. And finally, they can revise without fear. If they're scared of the safety stock, digital media is comfortable to them because they can make revisions without having to say they're sorry. So that was my fun with Javier, the digital media executive. But what about this one? Some of you may have read this in my column. If you go onto whattheythink.com and search for the title of the column is, look what I found. That's what was the article from about 18 months ago. Everyone's heard of the Cannes Film Festival? All of you, how many of you are asleep right now? You've heard of the Cannes Film Festival, right? All right, yeah, very good. Some of you are getting actually into this. This is the riveting part of the presentation, in case you were wondering when that was going to happen. Karina Falusi is the Ogilvy and Mather executive, Ogilvy and Mather being a legendary advertising agency. And she's on the panel to judge the advertising side of the Cannes Festival. And she writes this article about her experience there. And this sentence just was so amazing to me. I arrived at Cannes cynical of print, and I'm thinking to myself, what could have happened to make her cynical of print? Now, she's been in the advertising industry for most of her career. She's in her late 30s. She's the chief creative officer of this organization. She's got a lot of experience around the world about this. What would make her cynical of print except some of her experiences with advertisers and other clients? But why wouldn't she love it just because it's print? We want her to do that. But then after she saw what she saw, she said, I left inspired. That's surprising, going from one extreme to the other. Ready to find and embrace its strengths. What were they? What did she see? The first thing she saw was an architectural magazine from New Zealand, which had these absolutely gorgeously photographed pictures of beautiful, beautiful, high-end, expensive homes. But in every picture, as you looked harder, you realized something was wrong in each one. One of them may have had a broken vase on the floor. Another one had furniture out of alignment from the way it should have been. And as you go from page to page, you realize there's a message in these. We don't know what it is, and you realize it was a special feature in the magazine. You just went to the table of contents. You saw, pictures of this particular area, so you had no sense of what it was going to be until you get to the payoff of the last page. It was a campaign against domestic violence, about how everything that you see can sometimes have a dark side to it. And this tied in with a digital media campaign and videos, not just about domestic violence and the problem that it is, but also about the making of the entire campaign. So they got tremendous leverage out of this. It's an absolutely gorgeous, use of print and magazine. And like I said, the link to those things is in that column. So she saw in that also the interaction with digital media. Then there was another one that they looked at, and this is not necessarily print, but this is the delivery of print, the distribution channel that print has. They found a converter to make cardboard glasses that had special holes in it at particular angles that were delivered to Mexican families so that they could test their children for a particular kind of vision defect. And this was bound into the magazine, and the medical authorities in Mexico did not have the people or the time or the ability to cover the geography necessary to do that. But at schools and other places, they were able to just take these cardboard glasses, which looked really strange, and find out whether or not children need to go on for additional medical care for it. It solved a very, very serious problem. Almost had nothing to do with print except for riding along in its distribution. And then the last one was basically a stunt done by Burger King. And what Burger King wanted to do through newspaper ads and some other things, they wanted to declare a day of peace. And that day of peace was they were asking McDonald's to join them in preparing a certain kind of burger for that particular day. Now, the people at Burger King knew perfectly well McDonald's would have no intention of doing such a thing. But because it was such an innovative way, the message here, print is not in charge of the message, but print is used as a vehicle to deliver messages. This was the case where Burger King got a lot of attention and a lot of news coverage over it. It was a stunt, and it was a one-time thing. And we're always hearing about how print is permanent, how print can be a record. No, this was a stunt. This lasted one little time. So print has more dimensions than we expect. Were they going to make this a regular campaign? No, this is a one-time thing that they were doing, but it reminds us that we've gone from a time when broadcast and print was about all there was to a time when print is one among many and then gets tied in with the other media. So what does all this mean for print business leadership? That's a new term I just created for this event. Come on. Thank you. Print business leadership. Some of you thought it was an oxymoron. Some of you don't know what an oxymoron is. Some of you think that's me. All right, these things used to be true, but they're not anymore. Print relies on the economy. No, if you saw those slides at the beginning, if you were paying attention, you saw the economy was going this way, print was going that way. It's a totally different relationship. We don't need the economy to do that. In fact, if you follow the statistics close enough, you would wish for a depression because print is inversely related to the economy. And then print will go up because we have a depression. That'll work, right? Bigger companies, bigger profits. We were taught that. When it's mainstream, you could send those big ships down to the marketplace. No. A niche, a specific niche is a long-term springboard to success. No. New equipment lowers your costs. No, it doesn't. And industry capacity determines industry prices. I've tried to kill this thing for a long time. That's absolutely not the case. What is true? We still rely on a community of creatives who have great knowledge about media, about what they're doing. They're very, very flexible and very adaptable to creating messages that work in different kinds of media. Now they have the opportunity to have the same message work in multiple media at the same time. We need to be creative in working with them. But those are the folks. They're the people who create the messages. Smaller companies start to yield better profits. Some of the information that's coming out is absolutely stark. Niches are dynamic. You can't count on one niche forever. You should always be researching niches. This goes against what the industry was taught about 40 years ago. Concentrate on a niche, build your equipment all around that, build your staff and others around that. And this is a serious problem. We're in an era of tremendous technological change. What that means to capital investment and the way that we use technology in our business has a very, very big effect. The marketing life of the equipment we buy is different than the production life. Meaning that you may buy something that you intend to use for 10 years, the marketplace can change, you may only get 5 years of good marketing life out of that. And then you're stuck. You have capital tied up in that particular piece of equipment, and there's no more market for what comes out of it. That's risky. And what determines the prices? Well, you saw from the charts, the technologies and all the other things going around in other kinds of media affect the goals, the competitors, the distribution budgets, and the like. It's a much different marketplace than is typically described. So here is the big and small industry profits. This is from US government data, which of course means it's absolutely correct, because they're the people who tell the post office what to do, right? You weren't here for that part? All right, this is from the quarterly financial report. They break up printing industry into two categories: assets greater than $25 million, assets under $25 million. And for years and years and years, the average sales on each side of that group are about the same. The total revenues are about the same, even though there's only about 1,500 companies on the above 25 and somewhere around 18,000, whatever, on the other side. The average profits for the last 6 quarters of the biggest printing companies is 0.76%. That's not good. But 4.5 cents of every dollar goes to pay interest. How did that happen? Why did profits get so bad? Well, for the past few years, these companies have been writing off assets and goodwill because they no longer have enough demand for their services, or they overpaid when they were merging with other companies. So they're writing down all the goodwill. So the asset side of their balance sheet is decreasing, but the liabilities remain. You can't just write off liabilities unless you become bankrupt. But these companies are so large that the banks want to keep getting paid, so they keep rearranging their loans with them. Remember, most of these companies finance the entire organization. Smaller companies tend to finance particular pieces of equipment. So these are financing the entire organization. They're left with the legacy of all these failed consolidations and equipment and plants that are no longer out of date, but they still have to keep paying interest on them. Large companies can last a long time in this way, but they're not particularly effective in the marketplace. And as the marketplace has shifted toward more and more shorter runs of lower frequency, that hits these companies really hard on the revenue side, because those organizations were not built for that kind of use. On the other side, the assets with less than 25 million, their profits are 6.3%, and they're only paying 0.75%. Now, if you look at it this way, and if you call this, I call this capital contributors, organizations that have given capital to a business, of the total that I have, the profits plus the interest, that's 0.75 is only 11% of that total amount, of that 7 cents out of every dollar. Now, how did they do this? Were these savvy business people? If you're in this category, you should rise up and say, yes, I'm a savvy business person. No, because these businesses were always considered to be extremely poor credit risks. So they couldn't make really stupid business decisions because the banks wouldn't let them. So we want to thank our banks this morning for redlining our industry and not giving us any money. So how do these companies finance themselves? So generally, they're financing by owner equity, they're putting money in, but also by leases. So they're leasing individual pieces of equipment. This is a generalization, of course. And what happens if that goes bad? They lose the equipment. They don't lose their business. Will this last forever? Probably not. For the larger plants, that could last many, many years before all of that gets resolved. But for the smaller establishments, the smaller firms, we have a rush of new technology coming to the market that they may not be able to afford. We've got a shortage of capital. The smaller companies spend less as a percentage of sales on equipment investments than the larger ones did. Now, that got the larger ones in trouble. They spent too much and they borrowed too much to do that. But when you're going to be in a marketplace, when you think of, if you think back to that slide where I showed the internet speeds, and thinking that internet speeds went up 5 times in that particular period, then they're going to go up another 5 times, what's the printing industry going to look like at that particular moment? So we need capital investment in our business. This also changes the nature of the entire business. So what about consolidation? If the marketplace is changing and the speed of change is intensifying, it changes the way that we look at the kinds of businesses that we may want to consolidate with. And I worry about consolidation because so much of industry consolidation is done through a rear-view mirror. Now, Richard Romano and I wrote a book called This Point Forward, where we used the metaphor of the rear-view mirror throughout the book. It was a very good book. Richard, raise your hand. Sorry. Please applaud Richard because he wrote a good book with my crazy ideas, and then he added his crazy ideas. We stirred it up, and somehow all the words came out in the correct order. It was just amazing. But the rearview mirror is what so many of us do. If you go into a planning cycle and all you do is budgeting and say, what did we do last year? What did we do last year? What did we do before that? That's not planning. That doesn't help you. A lot of consolidation is based on what looks good in Excel, but not necessarily in the marketplace going forward. So we lose time in consolidation in terms of transitioning one business into another or integrating them into another. What happens if you have a tough transition or a poor integration? The market keeps changing without you. The customers keep changing without you. Now, this is a diversion of capital. So you have to ask yourself a question at one time or another. Should we really merge with this company, or should we go and bludgeon them in the marketplace so they die, and then we can have it all for ourselves? Sounds nefarious, right? Because I know some of you are nefarious business people. If you are, raise your hand for that. Yeah, we have some people. Oh, front row. Oh. So that brings the question, what are we really getting when we consolidate? Well, perhaps the marketplace has recognized this because a lot of print businesses do what are called tuck-ins. You've heard of tuck-ins? where you're just buying the book of business, that minimizes the consolidation effort. You're not really moving the two companies together, but it does remind you that the main thing that's happening is just buying the book of business. You're not creating any kind of new entity. So the real thing that we should be looking for in our consolidation is what consolidation increases our entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship gives you a new look at the marketplace. The old entrepreneurs kind of look to their left, who had this, who had that, I can do this. Now we have to look at what will the marketplace be when the internet rates are even 5 times faster than they are today? What businesses can we work with to help us in that kind of marketplace? Or what kind of leadership can we give to others because we have such detailed knowledge about certain aspects of the marketplace that they would want to work with us? The investment philosophy is totally different now. You spend less and know the risks, and a key part is avoid the marketing life issue. Turn over your equipment faster. If you work for EFI right now, cover your ears. Buy less equipment. All right, take your hands off your ears. Buy it more often, okay? Wear the stuff out. Obsolescence actually turns out to be a strategy. If you know the equipment's going to be going out of date, buy less of it, but make capital investments more often. Stay on the technology curve and stay ahead of your competitors. A way of doing this is, especially if you're a smaller company, there are 3 things that you can do. One of the things is we talk about in our book called Unsquaring the Wheel. Some of you may have seen it. We're going to do a couple of sessions on business development following this session. And I wrote the chapter in here. There's 8 major chapters about 8 aspects of a printing business, and the 9th one that we added is about alliances, and that's the surprising chapter that no one was really expecting. I had the privilege of writing that along with Wayne Peterson and Professor Chris Bondi. But I got the leftovers. I got the alliance chapter, and it's a good chapter. Also, joint investment and joint ventures. They could be with some of your compatriots that you have from across the country, whatever, where you time your capital investments together so that you can serve your clients in the best and most adequate way. If you keep the equipment busy, it will wear out faster. You make new investments in a new technology that's going forward. But if you have partners involved in doing that, if you create joint ventures and make joint investments, that can work a lot better. And then in this upcoming environment, take advantage of all that internet speed. Your workflow and MIS investments are really full commitments in the company, not just departments. We still see islands of automation and islands of computer technology in various companies, but not whole company investments in these kinds of things. And if you're doing joint ventures and doing alliances, you're investing for those organizations as well, and also for your customers. In this environment, of course, digital printing will dominate. Now, there will always be a market for all of the other print technologies. Again, there are niches. You're going to have to find particular niches to use those and use those well at the right time. But it's very, very clearly a digital printing market. The choices that we have in digital printing are changing. They're increasing. Once commercialized versions of high-volume inkjet come to the market of really, really high quality, that will ratchet it up some more. Many of the printers I speak to who have put down payments on this equipment are expecting very dramatic unit cost reductions for some of their most complex work that they have to run through presses, sometimes digital offset combinations multiple times. They're just seeing big opportunities in personalization that they'll be able to do. And then the whole aspect of data management that we created because we were trying to avoid postal rate increases, that data management that we sometimes do on behalf of our customers, that's going to be more and more important in creating personalized content for everyone. By the way, there's a company you may want to look up online. It's called Pebble Post, P-E-B-B-L-E, post.com. They have an interesting way of tying digital printing into marketing automation that I would have thought some other folks would have brought to market a lot sooner. The workflow investment, if you're going to be working with other companies, is very important because the more people time that you put in, as opposed to people information time, which is a lot shorter, the better. Now look at this chart that we had before. All digital printing can help you do all of these things compared to the way that you necessarily would have had to do them in offset. Because when the person who thinks print is intimidating comes to you and says, I don't know what quantity to order, well, let's try some first. Let's do a few thousand, we'll do it on a digital printer, you come back anytime. Because the nature of digital printing is to have more of a stable unit cost throughout the entire run, as opposed to the effect of economies of scale on long runs. But every single one of those, when you think about it, digital printing can help you with versioning, with different distribution methods, that different ways of integrating media. It's just a far more powerful tool in this kind of emerging market. And those alliances that I told you about, there are three kinds. In the book, we call the first one a task alliance, but doesn't gig sound so much sexier? I've got a gig today. I'm going to be an Uber driver, and then tomorrow I'm going to create a digital media campaign for 3M. I've met people like this. I drive to think. That's where you just go to some other company that has a piece of equipment that you need, let's say a different kind of folder, and that's it. The industry's been doing that for such a long time. There are other times you may have a complex project and say, gosh, we need 3 or 4 different partners. We need a web developer, we need a designer, we need a postal expert, whatever. We're going to bring them all together to make a bid on this particular project. The last one is the one that we believe is most important for the industry in dealing with the capital constraint and reducing the risk of technological obsolescence. That's a strategic alliance that you have perhaps with some others in this room. Over a period of time, you've worked together so long that you trust each other with each other's customers implicitly, that one stands for the other. You're all working to get different kinds of work and opportunities for each other. You have relationships in the marketplace with both resources and customers that you could never have if you were an individual company. And with the penalty that you have for being a large company in terms of not being able to turn in that decreased river level, the more and more companies that you work for in this kind of way can ensure your survival in the business. And this other thing, you've seen this, print is not dead. Hey, print, come here. I'm coming. I'm not dead yet. A nervous chuckle from the audience. Not a spring chicken anymore. It's not the same as being alive. Now, it could very well be that Karina Falusi, when she went to the Cannes advertising judging, felt that she had this not dead idea in it. Now, what's the word that automatically comes after not dead in your mind? You say yet, right? Print is not dead yet, which implicitly means it will be soon. No, we don't want that. We need a sense that print is alive. I've had discussions with a variety of folks in the industry. We really do need to have a younger, more vibrant approach to the marketplace. You don't want to send people who look like me, Generation X, according to the Postal Service, out to the marketplace to promote print because I don't culturally fit in with that. I mean, I'm a fun guy to be with, but you know, that I'm not going to be making decisions along with them. So how should we treat the printing media in the marketplace? We need to realize that for all these people, print is new. Print is a baby. Means all of the things that we used to say about print don't matter. Because any time that we refer to our experience in the printing industry going back decades, that penalizes us. We no longer fit into the marketplace because we're saying, gosh, they must have been really good back then. You know, it's like those baseball players who tried to do the comeback when they're like 45 years old, unless you're Bartolo Colon, of course, right? You keep coming back, but somehow the spark's not there, the reflexes aren't there anymore, and you just characterize yourself as not being part of the marketplace. But if we believe print is a baby, and start printing it that way. The world is open. If you've ever seen the way a baby looks at the world, it's always wide-eyed. And they learn by listening and watching. We learn how to interact by listening and watching. We try to teach by a good example, of course. And we create experiences where there's a learning opportunity. Now, that is not a plant tour, okay? That's not a learning experience when print is a baby, because we're dealing with business outcomes. One of the CEOs that I really like working with this past year says that with every new hire that she gets, she doesn't describe the print business in a particular way. She describes that we help people make money, we help businesses be successful. And that puts everything in a brand new context for them. So we judge our abilities and our success by what happens with our clients. And you may not realize it, but we are really looking at focusing on the purpose, not the process. Why are people communicating in this particular way? Keep your eye on the purpose. And when you think about it, your slate dealing with the marketplace is cleaner than you ever think. But if you keep bringing up all your experience in a marketplace that's no longer relevant, that doesn't help you. Fix that experience disparity, especially with your salespeople. The generational difference between most of our salespeople and the people we're trying to sell to should not be determined by years. It should be described by what happened to the technology in those particular years. Now, these last 10 years in communications technology have been phenomenal. So a 10-year difference back in the 1950s to the 1960s in print was no big deal. But a 10-year difference in the way we approach the marketplace is absolutely tremendous. Now, how do we break that particular gap? By using the technologies ourselves. Don't bring your baggage to the marketplace. Use the new digital media technologies yourself to promote your business and in the way that your people interact with all the decision makers in your communications community. Because print is intimidating, but you can show competence in this intimidating work by the way you use the media that they are familiar with. The commercial printing market, people like when I do forecasts. All right, here's one for you. Good. You're going to be happy now? The market's going down. You happy? You happy? Right? But look at one slice for digital printing. In 2016, it was about $11.4 billion in the commercial printing business. It's the only one that's really growing by 2022. It's growing up to $14 billion and becoming 22% of the marketplace. Labels and wrappers, about the same, stays exactly in the same spot. And their market share goes up from 14 to 18. But all of this, you know all of this is going to be wrong because every single one of you is going to change the way you do your business after this meeting, right? What? Commercial printing market is going to disappear. Why? Because it's going to become such a specialty business that people are going to have difficulty keeping track of it. You're not going to be able to categorize it. You might as well throw out the idea of any kind of government data coming out of this industry because it's going to be too small individually to track for them to track anyway. The market's going to become more and more mysterious because digital printing changes our structure, especially all the new products that are coming that can print on surfaces other than paper, especially in textiles and also on hard goods, three-dimensional goods. This industrial printing, you're not going to be able to find very much information for when it comes out to the marketplace. So this is the typical way that a lot of people approach specialty markets. You take an old tool that you have and you use it on something that you're not supposed to use it with. This is exactly what happened with many of the large printers. That's why the profit thing didn't work out for them. Yes, I've hammered a screw into a piece of wood. I know that would bother certain woodworkers in the audience. And I've pulled a nail with a wrench, right? We all do these things when we have to. But if you're going to be in the specialty market, you have to make a commitment for the right tools. and the right tools have to help you foster your client's business outcomes, because that's where your focus is supposed to be. It's not about how many things we sent to them or how they looked. It's exactly what happened to their business. Did they meet their objectives, and did we help them do that? So let's tie this all together. In the 10 years, we saw tablets and smartphones and social media and a whole range of other stuff. We get free broadband and free video every place except the Wynn, where it's $20 a day. But you could go outside somewhere, you can get your free broadband, right? It's everywhere. And we all have something called adapt amnesia. Adapt amnesia. We forget what it was like. After we start doing something with some kind of new software or new device, we forget what it was like before, until somebody asks us, could you send me a fax of that? And you go, a fax? How do you do that? Right? We don't remember these things. Print is new to today's communicators. Treat print like a baby. And we're going to have rampant management paradoxes. That's what specialty markets do. There's going to be markets for offset, the way it used to be. But those companies will be very profitable, very unique in the way that they do that, but they're not going to have a big marketplace anymore. There is a history of newness in our industry. We brought a lot of newness to communications in the past, but we can only figure out what to do with that when we immerse ourselves in that marketplace. So this is my sense, that there's going to be some kind of new rush of entrepreneurship in our industry as a result of all the digital media tools and digital printing. We have no choice, really, because unless we have this entrepreneurship, we're not going to be able to adapt to the marketplace. So we have to seek our problems in the marketplace and realize that unless we solve the problems of the marketplace, there's really no reason for us to exist. That's our purpose, to solve the problems of the marketplace and our customers. If we remember that print is a baby, as opposed to the way we used to think of it, those great days of the 80s and a lot of the 90s, when the industry's going great, everybody thinks that they're a genius. This is a different marketplace. When the industry is the way it is today, it really helps to be a genius. So I'm going to leave you with that, and I want to thank you very, very much.